This is South Dakota Patriot Broadcasting, brought to you by the Scene Projects Podcast Network. Well, welcome into South Dakota Patriot Broadcasting. I'm your host, Bubba Startz, and with me today we have Shirlee Meier. She's the State Director of the Convention of States for South Dakota. Welcome to the show, Shirlee. Well,
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to catch up with you on this, the last day of 2024, moving into a new year, an exciting time for our political movement, the Patriot movement. I know we have a lot of new legislators. We've been talking to a lot of them, but you come from a different angle and a whole different thing. So before we get into what the Convention of States is, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, and then we'll talk about more about COS.
Well, I'm a lifelong resident of South Dakota. I am also a veteran. I served in the military. I worked and I'm retired. I retired from the post office. After federal service, I put in probably about 50 some years. And then I retired. And when I retired, I decided what I wanted to do with my time, so I checked in different organizations, and I came across Convention of States, and I checked into it, and so then I volunteered, and I've been with Convention of States ever since.
That's amazing. So you've spent your entire life in service to your country, whether that's in military service or for the post office, which I think a lot of us tend to take for granted these days. And maybe less so around the holidays when the packages are getting delivered, and we remember what a service it truly is to have that. Incredible, and an incredible life that you've lived, and now in retirement, you're serving in a volunteer status as the director?
That is correct. I am not paid. I am a volunteer. Everything I do and the products and that I hand out and stuff, I pay for myself. So,
well, that's amazing. Yes. That's amazing. So what are, what is the Convention of States, and then what do you do in the state of South Dakota to, further the larger agenda?
Okay. Basically, what we are a nonprofit volunteer organization that came together in 2013, actually, with Mark Meckler, who was the original founder of the Tea Party, and then he left it. And him and Michael Ferris, who is the constitutional attorney who went to all 50 states and got homeschooling approved, they came together and they formed the Convention of States. Basically, what it is under Article 5 of the Constitution, there's only two ways to make amendments to the Constitution: Congress in Washington or your state legislators. If they pass the same resolution in 34 states, they can call a convention for proposing amendments. We have a resolution that has three subject matters: rein in the power and scope of the federal government, bring the power back to the states, where under the Constitution, all but 17 enumerated powers belong to the states, bring that back, and term limits on Congress and other officials in Washington, and then make them fiscally responsible, like a balanced budget. They can't just print and spend like they're doing now. We are so far in debt in that. And so that is what our resolution is about. We are volunteers. We volunteer our time. We are out there trying to educate the public, educate legislators. And a lot of legislators, they've got their hands so full. They have so many things coming to them. They cannot be knowledgeable about everything. So we're trying to educate them as to what Article 5 under the Constitution is. And we have volunteers. We get into fairs. We get into parades. We do educational meetings. We inform people and educate people.
So mostly what you're doing at this point in the organization's history is awareness and education, because most people don't know what Article 5 of the Constitution is or says.
That is correct. That is. Or they just read it and they don't totally read the second half of Article 5, which is for proposing amendments. You're not changing the Constitution. You're not rewriting it. You're just proposing amendments. And there's a big process that has to go to before an amendment can be made.
So this is the long way around to propose some kind of accountability for the bureaucrats and our other elected officials in Washington, D.C.
That is correct. And it's the only constitutional way to do it and make it permanent. They can do executive orders and all this stuff, but those are only temporary. They're Band-Aids. A next person comes in, they can just erase everything they've done. This is the original permanent way to make changes that can't be changed unless you call another convention in order to do it. And the whole process, it takes a lot. Do you want me to explain the process?
I would love you to, Shirlee.
Okay. What you do is when you have passed the same resolution in 34 states, then the state legislators are the ones who pick the delegates, and they give them their commission, telling them what they can do and what they cannot do. And then they send them to the place where the convention goes. One state, one vote when it comes time to vote. They break up into committees, and ours would probably be 3 committees because ours has 3 subject matters. They would come up with amendments that they all agree on. It could come up with 2. They could come up with 15. I do not know. But once they come together in a committee and they agree on the wording and that of each amendment, in order for it to come out of that convention, each amendment has to be approved by 26 states. Once they come out, then they go to the states for ratification. Each amendment has to be ratified by 38 states in order to become part of the Constitution. If anywhere along that process and that they try to change the wording of the amendments or anything else, it makes them null and void. And they have to accept them as they were. If they don't like it, then they just discard it. That is the process. It's a high bar, and it takes a while.
Well, and we're talking, possibly several election cycles, especially for, smaller representatives, state representatives rolling over every 2 years.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And that is true.
So there is a small window sometimes of these movements, like this populist movement that we're living in right now, where you actually have a chance to deliver on some of these promises of the Constitution and to affect some real change in the bloated and increasingly swampy Washington, D.C.
That is correct. And that's the only, and that unless Congress in Washington makes those changes, they're not going to do it. They're going to just do a Band-Aid on it, and then the next person comes in and they do their way. That's what we've had now, and we've been having for the last 20, 25, 30 years.
So this is kind of the people and the state legislations, and on all of the different state legislations. This is our power to try and wrestle some of that back from this bloated, federal government that we have now.
That is correct. And it's the only constitutional way that, someone can't come in and do it because it's part of the Constitution, and the Constitution is the law of the land. And there are people who will say, well, they don't obey the Constitution now anyway. That is not true. People don't realize that basically we live under 2 different constitutions. We live under the Constitution that our founding fathers gave us, depending upon which pamphlet you do. It's about 39 pages. They're very simple, very easy. But the one that Congress goes by and Washington goes by is this big one that's about 4,000 pages long, about 4 inches thick. And it's what the Supreme Court and other decisions have made and put in there. And it is the Constitution, the one that goes by. Some of them are not lawful. And that we want to break that up and bring it power back to the states where it belongs, like education. That is a state right. But the states have given up their power. So they have this big bureaucracy in Washington. States send money to Washington for education. Washington says, okay, we'll send it back to you under these stipulations. You do this, this, and this, and you teach this, this, and this. Otherwise, you're not getting the money. That is not the way our founding fathers wanted it. And there are other things like that the big bureaucracies in Washington dictate to the states. Give it back to the states where it belongs.
Well, and exactly why send the money back to be stolen to be sent right back to us anyway?
That's right.
The whole thing hasn't made sense, and I think that's a big reason why you had this massive populist movement rise up in 2024, and to take the Republicans to take the House, the Senate, and the presidency on the national level, and then the swell of Republican wins kind of across the board in the state legislators as well. But just new blood. I think 42 new legislators is what I heard from our friend Tessa Schwanz. And it just, I think we were ready as a society, as a culture, as a country. We were ready for some new ideas. We were ready for some fresh blood in there to start affecting some change and educating people and educating legislators on the power that they hold through Article 5 as to how we actually get something done instead of just kind of going through the motions.
That's right.
What are the challenges facing the conventions of states moving into 2025, and what are the obstacles that we're trying to overcome, in the short term, and then obviously in the long term? 2026 will be another huge election year.
Well, basically what it is getting people to understand what Article 5 of the Constitution is. There's a lot of misinformation out there about it. The main one is, well, you're going to rewrite our Constitution. That is not true. If you read Article 5, it's very explicit. It says, and that basically Congress can do it, or you're calling a convention of states for proposing amendments to this Constitution. So you can't do both. You can't rewrite the Constitution then and also propose amendments to it. That's but people don't understand. The biggest problem is getting people educated, having them read it and understand what it says.
Ignorance yes. is our biggest obstacle. And even people saying, something like, well, you're rewriting our Constitution. The Constitution has been rewritten. Right?
That is true.
We have been rewriting it for 200 years, 250 years coming up on it, so to suggest that all of a sudden, everything's going to be undone is more of facing the facts that it has been undone. And we're trying to get back to the original frameworks of the Constitution as they were written.
That is true. And I'm going to throw in another little tidbit, and I don't want it to confuse people, but they need to understand this. Washington itself, if it wanted to, if it had a great desire to, they could rewrite the Constitution tomorrow if they wanted to. They're there in Washington because, like I said, there's only two ways. They could call a convention right there in Washington and propose a whole new Constitution and do it if they wanted to, but you and I know they're not going to, but they could.
Well, and if they did, I would be terrified of what came out of there.
That's correct.
Shirlee, what can people do to get involved? Obviously, I'm sure you have a very large volunteer network. Why don't you have a website where people can kind of find out more information on their own and begin to put some action into their desires? Yeah.
You can go to www.conventionofstates.com, and there's a lot of material there. And we also have a university where we train people. There are 4 courses that are free. All you have to do is sign the petition and sign in and take those courses. They're online and you can educate yourself there. You can go and volunteer. There are many volunteer positions that you can have. And that, if you would like to, what we do require people to be educated, and that if they volunteer in for a big role, and learn more about us, you can call me if you want, go on our website. My address and phone number is there, or I can give it to you now. And call me. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to anybody who wants to know about Convention of States when we have things. And that will be at fairs and stuff again. If I'm out in Pierre, talk to me. I'll tell you everything that I know, so.
Well, that's great, Shirlee. I appreciate you taking some time for us today. I've already gained a lot of new information from this and a little bit of an education. We are happy to help in any way that we can to get some more of this information out to the people. And we have events throughout the year, and we would love for you to come and to share more of your story and more information about the Convention of States and what we can do as regular everyday citizens to have an effect on our lives, to put it quite bluntly.
And one of the best things that people can do is in their district, if they believe in Convention of States and they know about us, talk to their legislators. They have 3 of them in each district. Talk to their legislators. Have their legislators support us and that. And if they're against us, ask them why, and inform them. That communication and education is the biggest things. Is informing people and getting them educated.
And you just kind of hit on the focus of what South Dakota Patriot Broadcasting is. It's not necessarily a left or a right. We're trying our best not to lean one way or the other, but to present information, present some really interesting conversations, and then hopefully in the future we can start to get some people with opposing viewpoints to kind of hash these things out and to come to a real consensus instead of just doing this oscillation that we have back and forth between left and right. And we see now in today's current political climate that you only do that so long before the waves tip all the way left and all the way right, and then you end up flipping upside down and you don't know who's who or what's what anymore. And
True.
And that's exactly the time when you need something like this, a Convention of States, and more of the people who are out here every single day living in this country to speak up and to share their experience. And that is the basis of what podcasting is in general. I have 5 or 6 other shows that I host as well. And that's all it is, getting out our own human experiences, our individual human experiences, and see where we relate to the other people around us and in this country and in this world. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit of your experience today. And I look forward to getting a little bit more of an education on the Convention of States.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I appreciate you having me. And I mean, there's a lot of other things I could say and talk about that I would love to. So,
well, and maybe we can have a more regular segment where we come on and have a little bit more of a plan for what we want to talk about. And we'll make a whole series out of this, Shirlee. I would love to do that with you.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, yes, I'd appreciate that very much.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show today, Shirlee.
Okay, thank you for having me. And I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for tuning in to South Dakota Patriot Broadcasting. You can get more content and news at sdpatriotbroadcasting.com.